remember saying stop. He slammed my head against the wall, and I remember the pain.
Something drastically wrong is happening in how sexual assault cases are being handled.
We are getting no justice.
There have been evil people in positions of authority that have used the data to cook the books.
He was never arrested. There was never a search warrant. This is about justice.
I had been told that I needed to go back in and change the clearance code.
And what's wrong with that?
It's not truthful. And I think it just gives the appearance that we're able to clear more of these rapes than we actually are.
It just didn't meet my threshold of an arrest. It just didn't.
When the suspect admits to it in front of you in a recorded
I'm
interview,
not going to argue the law with you.
By nature, I'm a blue jeans t-shirt, pair of moccasins, love to be out in the woods. I love to garden. There's something about being in that dirt and then the result. To me, it's just, I love it. You know, this is the first year I haven't planted a vegetable garden in probably 25 years. I just kind of lost interest. Probably 2007 is when I first met him. We sat at the bar. We had the most nice conversation about careers, children, and I thought, wow.
Am I wrong to assume that in the beginning things were sort of fun and good?
Oh no, they were wonderful. Till he raped me. Yeah, I'm not afraid of that word, everybody else is, so, but yeah.
Ray Florrick has lived in Itasca County for most of her adult life. She's dated Randy Vanette off and on. She shared with us that years ago she had throat cancer and sometimes speaks softly.
So he had called that morning and said he had about a 2-hour window of nothing to do, and I offered to make him lunch. He didn't want lunch. He wanted sex. I told him I'm not feeling good, I did something, I just know. And then he just said, well, that's okay, babe. Because last time I was here, I took you 2 more times after you crashed.
This is someone you'd been dating for 4 or 5 years?
4.5 years.
And he's telling you, I had you when you were out.
He stole it when I was not able to even say yes or no. Picture someone moving your body around and doing that to you and you're out dead.
Ray Florrick filed a report with the Itasca County Sheriff's Office, accusing Randy Vanette of raping her. Vanette was never arrested or prosecuted, but the case would eventually make Itasca County look better at solving rapes. So how's that possible? To find the answer, we launched a first-of-its-kind investigation, looking at how police agencies across the nation can sometimes mislead the public about how effective they are in solving rape cases. We began by looking at what happened to Ray Florrick's case. My reporting partner, Bernice Young from ProPublica, and I went to visit the lead detective, Dean Scherf. He's now retired.
How are you?
Hi.
Detective? Mark Greenblatt.
Dean Scherf.
Good to see you.
Hi, good to see you again.
How are you? I was the on-call supervisor for that specific week that she reported her incident. When she called the dispatch center to report, they sent a patrol deputy to her house to take the report.
How did that go, that experience?
Not well. He was referring to Randy as like, I think he called him Rand.
Rand.
That was another red flag. Vanette raped me on that night, and then the next night he was here at the lodge with Dean Scherf for the Snowmobile Club. And so then right there I knew I was in trouble.
Florrick says she didn't trust the police would believe her, so before she filed the report, she decided to take things into her own hands.
I took the teddy bear that sat on my bed and took a razor blade and cut his belly open and put the camera in there and put him in the closet.
You're about to see a videotape that she made to provide evidence to police. The content is graphic.
God, I hope that's running.
You're beautiful. When you crash that fucking you. Stop it. Stop bringing it up. You're beautiful.
That has to be disgusting.
No, it isn't. It's beautiful. Oh. God, get over it. I want to make love to you all the time.
Wouldn't you rather have a willing participant?
Well, yeah. My name is Herman Millwood. But you're beautiful when you're next to me. Of course I want to take that.
Yeah, you
Yes.
took it.
Yes, I did. Yes, I did.
You helped yourself.
I did. I did.
She gave the tape to investigators. The question, would they believe a crime had been committed?
When I interviewed with the boyfriend, Randy, ex-boyfriend, whatever, he said we always had a normal relationship and that was just normal for us to do the sexual things that we did.
To get to probable cause, would you need the suspect to admit to having sex with someone while they were asleep?
Yeah, on that type of a case, yeah. I mean,
on 3/13/2013 at 0840 at the Sheriff's Office interview room with Randall Lee Vanette.
So that night, she called me like she's done a thousand times. I go over there, she's drinking. I know she's drunk. We had sex. And now we're spooning like this. And sometime in the night, like I have many times before, I wake up and I have a hard on and I slide it to her again. It isn't like this is anything new or different. We had sex, and then, well, after we were sleeping, I slipped into her again.
I appreciate you coming in, and don't be looking over your shoulder that we're going to come after you with a warrant or whatever. That's not going to be the case.
Why tell him at the end of the interview, after he had acknowledged sliding into someone who was, in his estimation, drunk and asleep, why tell him we're not coming with a warrant?
Because I wasn't gonna.
What the victim was alleging was that Randy had sex with her while she was asleep or passed out, and that she didn't consent to that. Is that a crime?
It could be. Yeah, I mean, it is. I shouldn't say it could be. It is.
So what were you missing?
It just didn't meet my threshold of an arrest. It just didn't.
What does it take to convince you to make an arrest in a sexual assault case?
A lot of things, sometimes and sometimes not. It's a case-by-case deal.
When the suspect admits to it in front of you in a recorded interview,
I'm not going to argue the law with you. I decided not to arrest him. He didn't get charged. That's the way it is. I moved on to the next case. I don't know what else to tell you. I did what I did, and like I said earlier, I did my job. Here's the case, Mr. Prosecutor. Do what you can with it. He decided to do what he did.
Todd Webb, the prosecutor, agreed with investigator Scherf and declined to prosecute. In an email to us, he wrote, "I concluded that there was insufficient evidence to reasonably believe that the charge could be proven beyond a reasonable doubt at trial." He explained his decision, saying Florrick didn't have personal knowledge of what happened while she was asleep, didn't report the incident until almost 2 months had passed, and he didn't believe Randy Vanette actually confessed on the secretly recorded tape, saying, "I would characterize it more as a concession made in an effort to resume their sexual relationship." Randy Vanette denies the allegations and says the tape was not a confession. In this email response, he said, "She knew that when she questioned me during these 2 secretly recorded sessions, that I would not argue with anything she said and would even apologize to get back together with her." He did not respond to our questions about his statements to police.
My name is Ellen Golan, and I'm a private attorney in Grand Rapids, Minnesota. Ms. Florrick had come to me when she was having difficulty understanding why the Itasca County Attorney's Office was not going to pursue criminal charges. It's pretty black and white in the summary that was written out by the investigator, where Mr. Vanette admitted that he had intercourse with her when she was asleep. And under the definition for rape in Minnesota, it clearly states that if somebody is physically helpless, they can't consent.
Would a delayed report have anything to do with anything if the suspect admits to doing what he's being accused of?
I don't think it has to do with anything, really, because I don't think it's unusual to make a delayed report.
Ray Florrick didn't give up. She pursued her case in civil court, where a jury found Randy Vanette did not commit battery, but did intentionally sexually penetrate her. And they found that he knew or should have known that she was physically helpless at the time. The jury awarded Florrick $5,000. Vanette is appealing the decision.
How has this changed you?
Every aspect of my life, Mark. Where I grocery shop, when I go outside, what I wear, what I don't wear.
Pause.
Yeah. Oh, I just gotta get out of this room for a minute, guys.
But that's not the only rape case that did not lead to an arrest. The same year Ray Florrick reported her case, the Itasca County Sheriff took in a total of 26 reports of rape, and FBI records don't show a single arrest. Still, records do show the county reported to the FBI that it cleared an impressive 54% of its rape cases. How could that be? Well, there's two ways that police can clear a crime, either by arrest or something called exceptional clearance. Ray's case was exceptionally cleared.
Clearing the case by exceptional means that the suspect is not held accountable in any way, and that the victim does not have her day in court.
Cassia Spahn is a leading national expert in criminology and has done extensive research funded by the Department of Justice on how law enforcement agencies in Los Angeles use exceptional clearance.
It means an exception to the general rule that cases should be cleared by arrest. They are not solving crimes. In the public's mind, when you say we cleared a case, I think the public assumes that means you solved it and you made an arrest.
Each year, police report the number of crimes that they cleared to the FBI through the Uniform Crime Reporting System. But for the majority of police agencies nationwide, they don't break down how many cases are cleared by arrest or how many by exceptional means. Even the FBI and the Department of Justice don't know exactly how many cases are cleared by exception for most police agencies around the country. For a case to be exceptionally cleared, the FBI requires 4 things must happen. Police must know who the suspect is, where the suspect is located, and have enough evidence for an arrest. There also has to be something outside of law enforcement's control to prevent an arrest, like the suspect is in prison, suspect is dead, or a victim drops off the case, or the prosecutor declines. But even if one of those does take place, the FBI requires that police agencies still have probable cause for an arrest to clear the case by exceptional means.
I think the fact that from its inception, the UCR has combined exceptional clearances and cleared by arrest into one category is a reflection of the fact that they assumed that the typical case would be cleared by arrest and not by exceptional means, and that these exceptional clearances would comprise such a small portion of all clearances.
In an unprecedented national review of how rape cases are cleared, my colleague Mark Fahey and I requested data from the 100 largest police jurisdictions across the nation. We analyzed the incidents from more than 60 agencies that provided their rape clearance data for more than 70,000 rape cases. And we discovered almost half those jurisdictions cleared more rape cases by exceptional means than by arrest, including police agencies in Oakland, Baltimore County, Hillsborough County, Long Beach, and Austin, just to name a few. We found for many police agencies, the type of clearance that's supposed to be the exception to the rule has become the rule for rape.
What struck me when I looked at the data that you compiled is the degree to which there is disparity among the jurisdictions in their exceptional clearance rate. Some jurisdictions use it very rarely. 5%, 10% of the cases are exceptional clearances. Other jurisdictions have rates that are 60, 70% of their cases are exceptionally cleared.
And Spahn says no one's looked nationally at the use of exceptional clearance until now. She adds,
if law enforcement agencies are using the overall clearance rate as a measure of the effectiveness of their response to the crime of sexual assault, that is simply misleading. Crime
stats are important to any city's image, and Austin, Texas is no different. So at city council budget meetings like this one, Chief of Police Brian Manley often showcases clearance rates to show how the city's doing on solving violent crimes like rape.
Clearance rates show the effectiveness of the work that we're doing. And we're fortunate that we do exceed the national averages on all categories, as you can see with the homicide, the rapes.
Either Chief Manley is being given bad information from those working underneath him, or, they're trying to purport something that's not true, or they are reporting something that's not true. My name is Elizabeth Donegan, and I have just recently retired from the Austin Police Department after nearly 26 years. At my level, I don't understand why you would not report something accurately. I don't get it. And that's maybe why I got in trouble, because I did what was right.
Sergeant Donegan led the sex crimes unit for Austin Police for 9 years, where she became known for earning the trust of rape victims. Top generals in the U.S. Army turned to her to learn how to better investigate sexual assaults. So did the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, Canada's version of the FBI. But in an exclusive interview, Donegan tells us that top leadership in Austin directed her to fudge the city's crime numbers for rape by changing suspended cases to exceptionally cleared.
I had been told on 2 different occasions from the same commander, under 2 different lieutenants, that I needed to go back in and look at these cases that were suspended and change the clearance code, because we were not up to the national average of exceptional clearance in Austin. And my response was, I'm doing things correctly.
You held the line.
I did, for as long as I could. And I told them that if information comes in that lends itself to this particular investigation that would have us change the case closure, then that will happen. But me going in and looking at these cases is not going to change the case closure. It is what it is.
What would be wrong, in your estimation, with just exceptionally clearing the case?
Well, I think it gives it a false sense to the community that this case has been thoroughly investigated and it's closed.
And what's wrong with that?
Well, it's not truthful. And I think it just gives the appearance that we're able to clear more of these rapes than we actually are. They forget that there are real people and that these aren't just numbers, that this is someone's life and that there's people behind the numbers, real people.
I didn't know until recently that my case was considered exceptionally cleared.
Marina Connor moved to Austin to attend the University of Texas. She and her friends often head to 6th Street, a sort of nightlife hub for those of college age.
I remember meeting up with a friend. We went and picked up his other friend, and then we all went downtown. It was past 2 a.m., and we were trying to find a ride home, and a man approached us, and then he asked us if we wanted to buy any cocaine. This man leads me into the alley, leads me to a parking garage. 2 men were there. The man that led me into the parking garage, he slammed my head against the wall, and then he raped me vaginally and anally. I remember the 2 men just being back over to the side. They were watching. It is something that I can't describe, and something that I'll never forget.
Marina had a rape kit done and reported the incident to police. They arrested the man she accused on drug possession and also questioned him about her case. He admitted that he had sex with her, but he said it was consensual. But medical records indicate trauma to multiple parts of her body.
And the police saw the same pictures that you saw, right? Mm-hmm. Like the bruises, scrapes, and the tears.
They saw all that. Yeah, they saw the tears. They saw at the end of the kit, the nurse has to say, if it looks like sexual assault and stuff.
But despite indications of trauma to Marina's body and the suspect admitting he did have sex with her, police insisted they still wait for the DNA test results. Nearly 2 years later, she got the defining call from her detective about her case.
Told me in a very short phone call, like all in one sentence, we got your rape kit back, there was no DNA, and the DA will not be prosecuting your case.
Just like that?
Just like that. I requested a meeting with the DA. I made her look at me while I told her what happened to me. I told her everything, and I was like, you're going to look at me as a person, as a survivor, not as this file sitting in front of you, and you're going to tell me why you're not prosecuting my rapist. And she told me without that DNA evidence, they couldn't get a jury to believe me, and they weren't going to take it to trial.
Marina and others are seeking class action status in a lawsuit against the Austin Police, the City of Austin, and the Travis County DA that accuses them of not doing enough to bring justice to rape victims.
In this community, we need to get back to responding to, investigating, prosecuting sexual assault the way victims deserve. Many of the things that I was trying to implement to effect change was met with resistance.
So what was the blowback?
Well, I don't know what was going on behind the scenes. I mean, I can only guess. But, I eventually was removed from the unit.
In 2011, Austin Police transferred Donegan to lead another division of the agency. She worked with the police department until this September when she resigned. During her last year in the sex crimes unit, Austin reported a clearance rate for rape of 44%. Data we obtained tell the story of what happened after she left. The very next year, Austin's rape clearance rate jumped to 59%, with the increase driven by a large spike in the number of cases exceptionally cleared. And that rise in the use of exceptional clearance continues through today.
Your department agrees with our findings.
Yes, we do.
Is it troubling at all to you that the Austin Police Department has a lot more exceptional clearances for the crime of rape than most other police departments?
I wouldn't say troubling. We do things here to not try and suspend a case at the earliest opportunity, but to instead try and pursue it as long as we can. So that may lead to us having a higher percentage of cases that are qualified to be exceptionally cleared than an agency that may choose to suspend it at the onset.
Sergeant Donegan's assertions are that she was directed on multiple occasions to go back in and change clearance codes for the crime of rape from suspended to exceptionally cleared. And she said it was wrong to do, and she refused the order.
Yeah, I think there was a difference of opinions on what the appropriate way to clear cases were.
You have no reason to believe she's not trustworthy.
I'm not here to make character assessments. I've known her for a long time, although maybe not well, and I've never known anything about her to make me think that she would be untrustworthy. Back in 2012, there was an internal analysis that was done with the supervisors of the sex crimes unit, and when they looked at how we clear cases, they determined that we were not, in fact, clearing them appropriately, but instead, cases that should have been getting an exceptional clearance were instead being suspended.
Chief Manley says the department never checked with outside experts about their use of exceptional clearance until after we shared our findings.
When this came to my attention and we were doing this review, we have since made that check, and we are confident based on that what we have been doing since 2012 is appropriate.
Who are those experts that you checked with?
We spoke with the division director at the Texas Department of Public Safety, the state police who oversees their records division, and confirmed that what we are doing is appropriate.
But when we asked Texas State Police, they responded with an email saying, "We provided APD with the FBI definition of exceptional clearances and advised if the case met the criteria, it could be reported as cleared. We have not reviewed APD cases or made a determination if any specific cases meet the exceptional clearance definition."
If we solved crimes, that would build trust in the community. We love our police force. That's how you build community trust. Would you be willing to commit all new police officers to solving unsolved crimes?
No. In violent crime, we exceed the national average nationwide.
I do have the actual clearance numbers if you're interested. We clear in 2013 57% of our violent crimes. The U.S. average is 39%. We far exceed in violent crimes.
Is that at all misleading in your estimation, though, to tell him that you're exceeding the national average for clearing violent crimes without also telling him about how many exceptional clearances make up the clearance rate for things like rape?
No, because I couldn't even put that in perspective for him, not having the data of all the other major U.S. cities that we were comparing ourselves to know how many of theirs were cleared by arrest versus cleared by other means.
But he's not asking about Houston or San Antonio or New York or Washington. He's asking about how often crimes are solved here in Austin under your leadership.
I believe I gave him a fair and accurate answer to his question.
Without going into how many crimes were cleared exceptionally versus how often you make arrests.
Again, I gave him a fair and accurate response, and I explained what that UCR data is and how we stood compared to our comparative cities.
It's just very offensive to me that they're using me and using my case to make it look like the city's safe. Being cleared sounds like a good thing. If you tell someone a case was cleared, that sounds like a good thing. It doesn't sound like that I was violently raped and my rapist is still out there. That's not what it sounds like at all. It makes me feel like I'm being silenced. It makes me feel like they're trying to sweep rapes under the rug.
Is it fair to say that if you're following the 4 guidelines to exceptionally clear a case, that then with the rapes that are exceptionally cleared, you do believe that the Austin Police Department, something in the case file, means that you've gathered enough evidence to support an arrest?
Yes. I couldn't exceptionally clear it otherwise.
You had 1,416 exceptionally cleared rape cases in between 2012 and 2017. So if it's true that what you're doing is totally on the up and up, that means there are people out there who the Austin Police Department has established probable cause to make an arrest on, but has not made the arrest. There is no prosecution, and they're on the streets. I mean, that's a lot of people out there that you have probable cause to make an arrest on that you're not arresting.
The unfortunate reality of sexual assault in this country is that survivors, number one, we know it's one of the most, if not the most, underreported crime, but then the process itself, unfortunately, keeps many survivors from wanting to participate in the process.
Is it really fair to blame the victims here?
I'm not blaming the victims. As far as survivors' willingness to cooperate, we go to tremendous extent to try and garner that cooperation.
Austin police and the Travis County DA both declined to address Marina's case because it's part of the lawsuit they're facing.
I thought that I was one of the few that they denied. I thought that it was my fault that I showered before my rape kit, that there was no DNA. So it makes me very angry to know that they're making survivors all across Austin feel like this. And that no one's getting justice here, and that they get to look better.
You're not talking about an offender who lives in this city, and we're talking about somebody that we had previously no idea existed, using the internet.
In our next episode, we'll show you why it matters even if you don't live in Austin. We follow the story of a suspected child sex predator, and we'll tell you which city he went to next after he was exceptionally cleared.